Hello, I'm Jacky Johnson, Technical Advisor here at the Bondo Corporation. Here at Bondo, we receive numerous calls on a daily basis from you, the consumer, wanting to know a little bit more detailed information on making your own auto body repairs. Here at Bondo, we make a full line of automotive products that you can make your repairs from start to finish. In this video, we intend to show you how easy it can be to make your own automotive repairs. We'll be showing you tips that are straight from the pros, but will be tailored so that the consumer will be able to use them with great success. So stay tuned with us as we go forward with some of these dent and rust out repairs so you would see just how easy it is to make your own automotive repairs. This video will be broken down into several major sections, each color-coded so you can start and stop the video while you work and refer back to the section at any time. Before we get started, we'd like to go through some of the products we'll need for this automotive body repair. Body filler spreaders, Bondo glass, fiberglass resin repair kit, paint remover, glazing and spot putty, one step, body filler, Bondo hair, fiberglass resin, self-adhesive patch, Mar-hyde undercoating, Mar-hyde total prep, body repair kit, body repair screen, automotive primer and paint. And some of the tools we'll need to make these repairs are the heavy dent puller, spreaders, masking tape, flexible sander, sanding kit, suction cup dent puller, wire brush, body filler file blade, body filler file tool, pick and bumping hammer, dolly, rubber mallet, filler scoop, Bondo rubber sanding block, buffing pad, aerosol can trigger, dust mask, and safety glasses. When using any of the Bondo automotive repair products, make sure you refer to the back of the can concerning the safety tips and instructions. Here's a few tips on how to handle Bondo and Mar-hyde products safely. Always use eye protection and dust mask when wire brushing or sanding. When painting or priming, make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. If not, consult the instructions for proper respiratory protection. Bondo body fillers and fiberglass resins, when cured, are environmentally safe materials. But like any household product, you should keep them out of the reach of children. If you use any solvents during the cleanup, be sure to follow the manufacturer's recommendations and safety precautions, including the use of rubber or disposable plastic gloves. As you can see, this car was pretty much damaged. We'll come in here and we'll repair this area and fill it in with the Bondo hair, and we'll come in here and fill this dent in. But we're going to pull this dent out to make it a little bit easier to fill. We're going to come in here and drill the holes in the deepest areas of this dent. screw the dent puller into the holes and use the dent puller to help pull the dent outward with this dent puller, which could be referred to as a slide hammer. Screw it into the holes. Good. If you were to pull the dent out a little too far, you can go back and just tap it right back inward. The next step is to come back and grind the metal after we've pulled the dent just about to the original contour. As you can see, this car is pretty much ate up with rust, having large rust outs like this. But even large rust outs like this can be repaired with any of our Bondo products. Bondo hair is a fiberglass reinforced body filler having long strands of fiberglass which help bridge over holes like this. Bondo glass is also a fiberglass reinforced body filler having short strands, and you can use the wire screen along with that to bridge over this type of hole. Also, the fiberglass resin and mat or cloth can be used to repair this type of repair using the fiberglass mat bridging over the hole. Also, this repair can be repaired with the Bondo body filler bridging over the hole again with the metal patch. Also, this type of repair that we're going to be repairing today will be using the fiberglass mat and the resin. But this same type of repair can be used on a fiberglass Corvette or your boat or any type of fiberglass body kit you may have. The same procedure we'll use here with the fiberglass mat and resin will be the exact same for this type of fiberglass. All body repairs follow the same basic pattern. First, if the hole is large enough, it must be covered with fiberglass cloth or metal mesh to bridge over the hole and support the filler. Next, the filler is applied and built up in thin layers. This is followed by cheese grating or filing the body filler to cut down the rough and high edges. Next, we sand the area with 80 grit sandpaper and apply 2 to 3 coats of primer. This is then sanded with 220 grit sandpaper, and a coat of spot and glazing putty is applied and sanded with fine grit sandpaper. The surface is then primed and resanded with fine grit sandpaper and now is ready to paint. All Bondo products after the application of fillers are finished in exactly the same way. Now let's take a look at a typical body repair. We're going to come in here and wipe the area clean and free from dust. And with this type of repair, all we need to apply is the Bondo body filler. Really pressing the filler in for adhesion purposes. I'm going to go back in now and just cheese grade the area to save on the extra sanding. This can be done about 10 to 12 minutes after the application. We've sanded with 80 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to come in and wipe the area to remove some of the dust and come in with our tack cloth to remove the small pieces of dust. We're going to use the red oxide Mar-hyde aerosol primer. We're going to apply 2 to 3 more coats of primer to this and let it cure. Just remember, if you're using Bondo glass, Bondo hair, or Bondo body filler, once you get to the primer stage, the repair procedure and steps will remain the same. And just remember, further along this video, we will show you a repair from start to finish. What we have here is your typical rust out. As you can see, the paint bubbling here, and in some cases the rust is already completely through. What we're going to do is finish masking this area off. And we're going to use our Total Prep to clean the area to be free from wax and grease that might be in the area that might prevent adhesion of the filler, the paint, or the primer. So all we want to do is just spray a good wet coat of Total Prep. And wipe it back off with a clean, dry rag. That's really important. And that will remove any wax or grease that might be in the area that would prevent adhesion. What we're going to do now is take our drill and sand out the loose paint and rust. We've already sanded down to the bare metal, as you can see, but even sanding, sometimes you still are not able to remove completely all the rust that had pitted into the metal. So the product we want to use now would be One Step. This is a rust neutralizer. It will convert the rust into a black primer, and this will kill the rust. Even rust can come back through body filler eventually. So we want to kill this rust first and stabilize it so it won't be any problem with this any longer. You want to apply about 2 to 3 thin coats, allowing each coat to dry about 3 minutes in between coats. It's been 24 hours now since the One Step has dried. It requires at least overnight drying before you can go to the next step. In this particular situation, we're going to be applying body filler to the rusted out area. Something very important is that you must sand with about 220 grit first. Also with this area, if you don't have any places that need to be filled, then all it requires is to lightly sand the One Step with about 220 grit sandpaper and re-prime with another primer, and then you can go on to your painting process. We're just going to lightly sand with 220 grit sandpaper here. This is very important. This is going to allow the body filler to adhere to the One Step. What we want to do next is come over here and tap the rusted areas inward so that we can apply the body filler next. That'll be our next step. What we're going to do next is cut out the self-adhesive metal patch to kind of bridge over our first rust out here. Just want to trim it so that it bridges over the inner edge of the metal where the hole begins. You want to countersink the metal patch slightly so that it will be below the surface. Any excessive metal patch can be sanded off during the sanding process. One of the most important things when making your own auto body repairs is the mixing procedure of using Bondo. Here at Bondo, we have more calls on our helpline from consumers who possibly didn't use enough hardener or used way too much hardener, but the procedure is really simple, and we'll go through that mixing procedure with you now. When mixing the hardener with the body filler, you can always use the rule of thumb of if you use a quarter tube of hardener, you can use a quarter can of the filler. Or if you dip out about a golf ball size, you want to squeeze out about 1.5 inches of the cream hardener. Always remember, in 77 degrees Fahrenheit, the body filler will start to gel and harden in about 4 to 5 minutes. If it's hotter, it's going to gel faster. If it's colder, it's going to gel a little bit slower. So you may have to adjust your hardener to the weather, but stay pretty much within the ratio that we suggest. When mixing the body filler up, you always want to mix it folding the filler over and spreading it under. You never want to mix the body filler in a circular motion, because that will trap air, which eventually will cause pinholes and will show up in your painted surface. It's easy to tell when you have a good mix of the filler and the hardener because you would have a uniform color. The color will all be the same, and the red hardener and the gray filler will end up a salmon or a real pastel pink color, and we also have the color match spreaders that also match the filler. What we're going to do now is apply body filler over the screen to bridge over the holes here. You always want to apply body filler in thin layers, making your first wipe, initial wipe, really pressing the filler into the sand scratches. It's always important to apply the body filler in thin layers, building up the thickness. Each thin layer acts as a shock absorber for the next layer and would prevent cracking. What we're going to do now is cheese grade the filler, or file it. What this does, it saves you a lot of sanding time because it cuts down the areas that are higher than what they should be, and it saves on a lot of sanding. And we're going to be going back and applying additional filler to this, but we're going to go ahead and cut down our high spots at this point. What we're going to do now is come back and apply another layer of the body fillers. Rubbing my hand over this repair, I can tell that the fender is not back to the original contour yet, so we need to make another quick application of the body filler. Okay, we've applied our second application of body filler. We're going to come in now and cheese grade or file this one to save us a lot of sanding time again. You can cheese grade your body filler after about 10 to 12 minutes after the application. Really saves a lot of sanding. We've applied our last application of body filler that we need to bring it back to the contour, so now the next step will be to start sanding with 80 grit sandpaper. We're going to be going still with 80 grit sandpaper, but using a sanding block. The sanding block keeps the sandpaper flat against the surface during the sanding process so that we can come out with a level surface. I'm going to go with finer grit sandpaper now to help feather edge out the body filler where the metal and the body filler meet one another so that we can have a real smooth surface. You want to make sure that the edge where the filler and the metal come together is completely smooth here. So when you rub your finger across it, you don't feel any type of ledge or little cliff area here. Our next step is to wipe the surface clean with a dry, clean cloth to remove the excess dust that would be on the surface. As soon as we wipe it down, we'll come back with a tack cloth and wipe the area to remove the remaining dust. You don't want any dust in your primer or paint. This is Mar-hyde Supreme Primer. If you notice, we have a red oxide and we have a gray. The gray is for whites, gray colored cars, silvers, and pastel colored cars. The red will be great for doing colors like red or like this car here, burgundy. You need to make sure you always shake the can well before making the application. We're going to put on 2 to 3 thin coats of this primer. It's okay if your repair shows through even after the first application. We're going to go ahead and apply the second coat now. We have waited about 5 minutes between the coats. Putting on a little bit thicker, starting to completely cover up our repair now. Just like one more coat would probably do this job. Now that our first coat of primer has dried, we're going to go with a medium to fine sandpaper and fine sand the primer. After doing this procedure, we'll be able to see any imperfection that may be in the primer and the filler before painting. Once you finish sanding, again, you'd need to wipe the surface with a clean, dry cloth. And at this point, you'll be able to see imperfections that lie in the primer and in the filler. Now we'll make an application of our glazing and spot putty. This product will, again, fill in the small imperfections that lie on the surface. And this product is designed to go on real thin, really pressing the product in. What we're going to do now is come back and sand the spot and glazing putty with 180 to 220 grit sandpaper. We'll be sanding off what we don't need here, and the only glazing and spot putty will be left with what we need to fill the imperfections. Now that we're finished sanding the spot and glazing putty, we want to clean it off with a dry rag to remove a large amount of the dust, and then we'll take the tack cloth and wipe the area down so we can get ready to prime it. The surface is smooth and ready for the primer. We're going to prime the area in now with our Mar-hyde primer that's been shaken. And it's okay if you still see the repair after you make your first application. We're going to untape the primer now so that we can sand these edges so that we can feather edge into the original paint job here so that we don't have these rough edges. We're going to be sanding with 400 grit sandpaper to feather edge into the original paint here and to sand the primer to prepare it for the paint so that it will adhere. Now that the primer has been fine sanded, we'll come in and wipe the surface with a clean, dry cloth to remove a lot of the dust. And we'll come with the tack cloth again to finish removing the remaining dust. Now that the surface is completely smooth and back to the original contour, we're going to mask off this area to show you how the pros would feather this paint into the old original paint. Now that we've masked the majority of the car off, I would like to show you that technique that the pros use to mask their cars off so that the paint feather edges itself in. Notice the curl in the masking paper here. That will allow the paint, when being painted, to just feather itself out into the original paint. We're going to use the Mar-hyde aerosol spray paint on this car to spot it in. However, you can go to your local auto paint supplier also, and they can mix the paint for you. You want to apply several thin coats of paint. Now that we have brought this repair back to its original contour, you can see how easy it is to make your own auto body repairs. Let the paint dry a couple of days, and then you can use the Bondo rubbing compound, the Bondo polishing compound, along with the Bondo buffing pad that is easily attached to your drill to bring it back to a real high gloss. We're going to repair this rust out now, and even though it looks like it would be impossible to repair, we're going to show you how easy it is to repair with the polyester fiberglass resin and fiberglass mat and cloth. We'll sand now to remove all the loose rust. Now we're going to tap the edges in of the repair. Just trying to countersink it a little bit. We're going to spray this area to neutralize the rust again with one step. We'll let the one step dry overnight. Then we'll come back and sand it. One step will turn into a black primer that will help neutralize the rust. But very important to come back and sand it before applying the body filler or the resin. Now that the one step has dried for 24 hours, we've come back and sanded to make sure we have a good surface for adhesion. The mixing ratio for fiberglass resin is 12 drops of hardener per ounce of resin. We have about 3 ounces here. We're going to be mixing in 36 drops. Okay, we're going to take our pre-cut fiberglass and push it down into the fiberglass resin so that we get good wet out. This is very important. And while the fiberglass is saturating, we're going to go ahead and brush on a coat of resin on the damaged area. You're going to wet the surface real well with the fiberglass resin. That will allow the fiberglass mat to adhere to it better. Okay. We're going to put on our first piece of fiberglass here. Once you apply your first coat of resin and then your mat, and you get your entrapped air out, then you want to come back and with your last coat of resin over the top of it. This same process can be used with all the different layers of fiberglass that you feel like you need. On this particular repair, we are going to be applying about 2 layers of fiberglass mat. It's been a couple hours now since the fiberglass has dried. As you can see, we fiberglassed over this very difficult rust out. What we're going to do now is come back and sand it with 80 grit sandpaper to get it prepared for a skin coat of the Bondo body filler. We've just sanded the area of the fiberglass repair with 80 grit sandpaper. We're going to apply a thin coat of the Bondo auto body putty, which will give us a little bit more paintable surface. As you can see, we've come back over the fiberglass repair with a skin coat of Bondo body filler. We've sanded that with 80 grit sandpaper, and now we're ready to prepare the surface for priming. We want to wipe this surface to remove any of the dust. And then we will wipe again with the tack cloth. Which will pick up all the loose dust. Now we're ready to prime this area. Remember to use long strokes and not to hold the can in one area. Keep the can moving. If you were to get any runs in your primer or paint, remember that you can always go back and remove them. Now that we've applied our first coat of primer, we're going to come back and apply a thin layer of the spot and glazing putty. Once we've done that and the spot and glazing putty has dried, we will sand the spot and glazing putty with 220 grit sandpaper. Then we will reprime, sand the primer with 400 grit sandpaper, and paint the damaged area. This here will be a good repair to show you how to use our Bondo hair product. This is your typical weld well rust out. And we'll need to remove the paint and the loose rust here with our 80 grit sandpaper. Now that we've sanded all the rust and the loose paint, we're going to clean the area off with a clean, dry cloth. We're going to tap the rough edges of this rust inward so that we can come back with a filler and fill it. And now we're going to come back and treat this area with the Mar-hyde one step to neutralize the rust that we were not able to remove. Now that the one step has dried overnight, we've come back and sanded the area with 220 grit sandpaper so that the Bondo hair will adhere to it. Now we're ready to apply the Bondo hair to this damaged area. As you can see, the Bondo hair is a Bondo body filler that has been fiberglass reinforced with fiberglass strands. This will make our repair a waterproof and watertight repair, and also will be beneficial when bridging over holes. We've dipped out about a half pint here, and we're going to squeeze out about a 7-inch ribbon. It's about 4 inches there, and we'll give another 3-inch ribbon here. Always remember, when using any of the Bondo automotive products, when mixing, you should always use a non-porous surface. Never use cardboard or wax cups or anything of that nature. We're going to take the Bondo hair now and bridge over these cavities. The good thing about using Bondo hair is that it's not really necessary to use the metal mesh, because the fiberglass reinforced product will bridge over these holes. The Bondo hair now has dried for about 10 to 12 minutes, and now we can cheese grate it, which will save us a lot of sanding time. After cheese grating this, we're going to come back with an 80 grit sandpaper and sand it just a little bit smoother. And then we'll make an application of the Bondo body filler, a thin coat, to make a little bit more desirable paintable surface. We're going to wipe down the surface with a clean, dry cloth to remove the dust. And what we're going to do now is come back and apply a thin coat of the Bondo body filler, which will help us to end up with a little bit more desirable paintable surface. And just remember, this is what makes it so easy. Once you get to the body filler stage and using any of the Bondo products, the repair procedures and steps remain the same. We're going to apply a thin coat of the Bondo auto body filler here. We'll end up with a little bit smoother surface. Now we've masked the area off, and we've already sanded the skin coat of body filler with 80 grit sandpaper. But just remember, we've already applied the one step, the Bondo hair, and now the skin coat of body filler. It's been sanded. We're ready for the priming stage now. We're going to wipe this surface with a clean, dry cloth to remove some of the dust. This dust would prevent adhesion. We're going to wipe the area also with a Bondo tack cloth. Now we're ready to prime the area. Make sure when you prime that you cover all exposed metal. Now that the surface has been primed, we would come with the glazing and spot putty, do a thin coat over the surface, then come back and reprime the area, sand it, and paint it, using the same procedures we've used thus far in this video. This is going to be a perfect candidate for Bondo glass. Bondo glass is very similar to Bondo hair, except it has short strands of fiberglass. It is good for bridging over small to medium holes, and this is a perfect candidate for this. We've already treated the area with one step to neutralize the rust. We're going to be applying Bondo glass now. As you can see, because of the fiberglass in this product, again, it just helps fill these holes up completely. Now that we fill the hole with the Bondo glass, we'll come back and sand with 80 grit sandpaper. Then we'll come back and do a skin coat of the body filler, sand it, prime it, then sand the primer. Then we'll use some spot and glazing putty to fill in the imperfections, reprime it, and paint it. Remember, when using Bondo glass, Bondo hair, or fiberglass resin, once you get to the filler stage, your techniques and procedures will be the same. Now that we've completely repaired this car, we decided to paint the entire car. As you can remember, this car had several rust outs on it that has been easily repaired with the Bondo products. There's nothing you can do to increase the value of your car more than do body work. And the easiest way to do body work is to use quality Bondo products. Now that you've seen how easy it is to make your own auto body repairs, I'm sure you can find other uses for Bondo body filler around the home. Bondo body filler also can be used on wood, concrete, sheetrock, metal, stone, your cement driveways. Also, if you're not able to Find the Bondo body filler, also all-purpose putty can also be used for these type of repairs. We'd like to thank you for watching the Bondo Mar-hyde video. And would like to remind you, if you have any further questions on making auto body repair or repairs around the home, feel free to call us here at the Bondo Corporation. And just remember, the limit with Bondo is your imagination.